Alright, I'm doing a 6-part series of videos entitled A Guide to Switching to Linux, Linux Mint Edition. And today, I'm going over navigating the Linux Mint desktop. So now, this video is designed to make it easier to get settled into the Linux Mint desktop. Since even though Linux Mint is designed to resemble Windows out of the box, there are still some differences that may confuse new users coming from Windows to Linux. But anyway, without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so now this is the Linux Mint login screen. So now we've got our wallpaper right here, and we've got the name of our system, in this case Linux PC. And if you come up here, you've got options here to power off the system. If you click on this, you can suspend the system, which is what Linux calls sleep mode. And you can also click quit, which will allow you to shut down or reboot. And then you've also got the current time right here. And if you hover over that, you get the date. So it's 4:59 p.m. And then you've got the accessibility options right here, including on-screen keyboard. You just click on that, and then it'll bring up the on-screen keyboard. And if you want to get rid of it, you just click on that, and then you just click on it again, and then it goes away. So then you get the password bar right here, and your user account name right here, in my case, Tech. And you can change your desktop environment by clicking here. By default, you've got Cinnamon. And if you installed other desktop environments, this is where you'd select the desktop environment of your choice. But don't worry about that too much now. That's going to be later in your Linux life. But anyway, we can just log in here by punching in our password. Now, when you log into Linux Mint for the first time, you'll get this Welcome to Linux Mint screen. Now, you can uncheck Show this dialog at startup if you don't want to see this again, and you can read this on your own time. But let's go to first steps, and we can actually choose the color of our desktop. Let's say if we want to go with red, you just click on that and then it sets. But you know what, let's actually go with the default look, since that's what's mainly associated with Linux Mint, because Linux Mint is known for its green on black colors. But anyway, now we've actually got a dark mode here. If you toggle that on, and we're in dark mode. And if you want to get out of it, you can just toggle it off. And you can actually change the layout of your taskbar here. If you want the traditional layout, you can do that. But I actually like the modern layout, so let's switch back to that. And we've got other stuff we should do after install. If you install this yourself, you should actually probably do all this stuff, but I'm not going to bother with that since I have no interest in drawing out this video too long. And then you got some documentation here, and then the help menu where you can get support from the community. And if you ever want to contribute, you can look at ways to get involved here. But let's actually close out of this and look around the desktop, since that's the whole point of this video. So you got your menu right here. This is kind of like your start menu on Windows. It's where you're going to find all your applications. So you can search for applications here. Say you want to search for Firefox, you can get to that here, and I know it's right there on your dock. And this also categorizes your applications based on type. Like you got your internet applications right here, your audio and video players right here, and then you've got your office applications here, etc., etc. Now you've also got access to your files from here. You could do it from here, but this is another quick way to get to your files, including your videos, pictures, music, documents, etc. And you've also got access to recent documents right here. Now there's nothing since I haven't actually used this VM, but you've actually also got your files application right here. Also some other applications that we're going to take a look at shortly. And you can lock the screen by clicking here, log out by clicking here, and then you're also able to shut down or restart the system by clicking here. And we can click cancel to get out of that. Similar with the logout menu, log out to log out, switch user to switch user, or cancel if you want to get out of that. Now if you lock the screen, it brings you to this screen, and you've got your on-screen keyboard right here. You can click here to take it down, and you've got an option to switch user right here, and then here's the unlock option. And I've got to punch in our password, otherwise it wouldn't really be much of a lock option. There you go. But anyway, let's look at the right of this taskbar, starting with the clock here. Again, the current time. If you hover over this, we can look at the current date. This video is recorded on July 31st of 2021. If you click here, you get access to your calendar, and we can get into the date and time settings. And let's turn off the 24-hour clock, since I'm sure most of you are used to the 12-hour one. Here it is. Now we've got our sound settings right here, and our network settings right here. I'm connected to a virtual adapter, since this is a virtual machine, and we're able to safely remove hardware right here. We can eject our Linux Mint ISO by clicking this eject button, or if you clicked here, it would actually bring you into the ISO. But you know what, let's actually eject it, and there you go. And it says it can be removed. And then you've also got Update Manager. If you click on that, we'll actually get to that in part 4 of this guide, which would be installing software. And then let's look at what requires our attention here. It allows us to install language packs and set up the system restore utility. These are not really 100% necessary, but if you want to though, I'd strongly encourage you to. I'm not going to bother with either of these for now, so we can click ignore this report and then okay. Same with the other report. I normally honor these reports, but in my case, this is a virtual machine, and I'm going to be deleting this right after I'm done with this video. And we've got our system information right here, very technical system information here, if you want to go through this. And we've got our very technical crash reports here. So this would actually be a fun application if you really like to get into technical information. But anyway, let's get out of that. And on the desktop, we've got shortcuts to our file manager. If we click on computer, this is the equivalent of this PC. We've got access to our Windows partition here. If we click on that, got everything here. Now let's actually unmount this by clicking eject. And you've also got what's called the file system root, which is just a single / here. Now this is like the equivalent of going into the local disk on your Windows machine. Now don't get too concerned about the file structure here. That'll be later in your Linux life. It's not really essential to know exactly how it works in order to use it, but if you want to learn it though, by all means go ahead. But again, that'll be later in your Linux life. And actually, if you come back to your Windows partition, one interesting thing is that Linux can see the data on your Windows partition, but Windows can't do vice versa. And that's due to file system differences, because Windows cannot read the ext4 file system, which is what many Linux distros, including Linux Mint and Ubuntu, use for their internal drives. But Linux can read the NTFS partition, which is what Windows uses for its internal drives, and that's needed on Linux for compatibility. But anyway, we can go unmount this. And if you wanted to get back to this computer, you just click go and then computer. And then you've got the DVD-ROM drive right there, if you're one of those people that still have it. And we've also got a shortcut to the home folder on our desktop. Now, if you open files from here, it'll bring you to the same place. So I don't quite get the point of this, maybe for user friendliness. But anyway, this is like the living room of your system. All the data on your account will be stored within here. And you can show hidden files by going up to view and then clicking show hidden files. And then there you go. Now on Linux, hidden files start with a dot. So if you start a file name with a dot, it'll be a hidden file. But anyway, we can get out of here. Now if you wanted to connect to a server, you just go into your file manager, then click file, connect to server, and then punch in your information here and select what type of server it is. If it's a Samba server, for example, you click Windows Share, or if it's an SSH/SFTP server, you'd click on SSH, and then off you go. Now, if you're one of those people that uses key-based authentication for your SSH server, you just punch in your username, but then leave the password field blank, and then it'll prompt you for the passphrase for your SSH key, and then you just punch that into the box that appears. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about here, you don't need to worry too much about it if you don't have an SSH server. And by the way, SSH is a protocol that allows you to run commands on a Linux system from another system, for example, and SFTP is an SSH protocol that allows you to securely access files on a system from another system. And by the way, we can get out of this by clicking cancel. So now before we go much farther, let's look at the system settings. And you've got all kinds of settings here. For example, you've got themes, and this is where you customize your desktop. You can even add or remove themes right here. You can even install new themes from right here. And backgrounds is where you'd go to change your wallpaper. You can inside your pictures folder from here, or you can add a folder from here. You just click on the file that you want, and then click open, and you can look at all the wallpaper options right here. I actually really like this one, so you can just click on that, and then it'll apply it. Now I'm actually going to change back to the default wallpaper to go with the theme of Linux Mint, since that's what this video is all about. And then if we look at the preferences, you can get to your accessibility options from here, and this is where you would go to change your account picture. Let's see what default account pictures they have. You can just select whichever one you want. I actually really like this one. Then that'll be your account picture. And if you want to change it back to the default, you just click on that. And then this is where you go to change your display name for your account. Now you cannot change the username since that's used to name the home folder. And you'd also go here to change the password. You just punch in your current password and then your new password. You can even get it to generate a password for you. Just make sure you remember that. But anyway, let's look at our privacy settings. And if you don't like the recently accessed files feature, you can turn it off from here, and then it won't show the recently accessed files in your menu. And then let's get to the hardware settings. Your network settings is where you're going to go to set up your wireless connection, and you can hit the plus button to add a VPN configuration here. And then if you click on disks, it'll just open up the disks application, where you can see our partitions, including our Linux Mint partition and our Windows partition. And we can actually also check our disk usage here. As you can see, we got 23 gigs here. And if you mounted our Windows partition, we could see how much we're using on that. Oh, even more. We're actually almost half full on our Windows. But anyway, we can unmount this. And you've got our DVD drive here, or our virtual DVD drive, since this is a virtual machine. And our power management settings is where we go to change when our screen turns off and when to suspend the system after an activity, and we can also control what the power button does here. And then this is what we click on to set up our printers. If you click on printers, it opens up this, and then we can add a network printer here just by going to network printer and then find network printer, or alternatively, you can enter the URI if you know the IP address for your printer by typing in IPP:// and then the IP address for your printer, and then it's probably going to make you select what printer you have, so you also need to know the printer model. But anyway, we also got our system info here, including our operating system, what version of Cinnamon we have, our Linux kernel, that can actually be very useful, and what processor we have, how much RAM we have. This is a virtual machine, so I only gave it like 2 gigs of RAM, and how big of a drive we have, and even our graphics card. And then this is actually where we go to manage our Bluetooth devices. And we don't have any Bluetooth adapters here since this is a virtual machine, but that's where you go to connect a Bluetooth speaker or wireless earbuds or any other Bluetooth device you have if you did have a Bluetooth adapter. And then driver manager is what will allow you to need to punch in our password to authenticate, easily install drivers that are missing for any hardware that you may have. This is actually quite often used to install the proprietary NVIDIA driver if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, and it says that our system does not need any additional drivers, so we can close out of that. Now, of course, this doesn't always work, but if you're missing a driver or you want to install the proprietary driver for your graphics card, for example, you can always check driver manager. And if you have some issue where particularly your wireless card is not working, I would just go update the system just to see if a Linux kernel update fixes it. If it's that new, you may need to go to a mainline Linux kernel, which is not really recommended unless you have a particular piece of hardware that'll only work on a mainline kernel, since those are not as well tested, but that is an option. But anyway, if we go to our firewall configuration here, this is where we can configure our firewall. We can just toggle this on, and then now we have our firewall enabled. And if you're a normal user, you can just leave the rest as is. And if you go to the rules tab, you can just add a firewall of rules here. There are even presets for particular applications. Or you can specify a port number manually by going to simple. Or if you really want to tinker and fine tune, you can go to advanced. Now, I just want to say, if you're not planning on running any server applications on this doesn't have any server applications listening in by default. So for a home user, this is not really necessary. I just want to say, don't enable the firewall out of fear, thinking that'll magically protect your system from malware. Firewalls don't work that way. They're really just a way of filtering out communications going to and from a computer or a network. And Linux, by default, is a lot better protected against malware when compared to Windows, because you got trusted software repos, constant security updates, and Linux is also a much more locked down environment by default. But anyway, we can get out of here. And then this is where we'd go to customize our login screen. For example, you wanted to change the wallpaper, you just click on that, and then select the wallpaper that you want. We can click cancel to get out of here, and we can even choose our theme here. And then we've got users and groups here, which is where we'd go to manage our users. Now, don't worry too much about groups here. That'll all be later in your Linux life. But anyway, for users, you can just click on information for a particular user. Now, don't downgrade yourself to standard unless you have another administrator account, because that could actually cause problems when you're trying to install software. And if you're a new user, that can be a pain to fix. But anyway, you can actually change the account picture here and also reset a user's password. You can change what groups you're in if you're an advanced user. You can add users by clicking here and then selecting their account type. Now, administrators are allowed to run commands as root by using the sudo command and also do administrative tasks like install new software, whereas standard is much more locked down. If they want to do anything administrative, they have to get an administrator to authenticate for them, and they cannot run commands as root by using the sudo command. Then you just select the full name of the user, then the username, then click add, say like example here, and then username, let's say we want just example, then we can click add, and then you should set a password for the user. You can go here, then punch in a password. Now for this demo, I just put in a wimpy password since I'm going to be deleting this user account right after I'm done with this, but this should be a strong password. Then you can just go click change, and then you got a password. And if you want to delete a user account, you can just click delete, then click yes. But anyway, we can close out of this, and let's get out of here since I don't want to drag out this video too long. And I also want to say that Software Manager is where you go to install new applications. It's kind of like an app store on your phone. Now, if you're going to be getting into Linux, you really need to break the habit of going to the website and downloading the exe file and running the setup. It doesn't work that way on Linux. So be a normal Linux user. Use the package manager. If something's not available on the package manager, then you turn to the author's website just like on Windows. But even then, don't go for any .exe file. That does not work by default unless you install Wine, but most Linux users wouldn't really fall for that anyway, since Wine is very hit and miss when it comes to compatibility, especially if you're a complete noob. Since this is Ubuntu based, you'd want to look for a .deb file or some other Linux specific installer, and the developer should have instructions on how to install the program. But anyway, most of your applications you're going to be getting from here, and I'll go over that in part 4 of this video, which will be installing software. Now, I just want to take a quick look at the terminal, since you may actually find that this is going to become a most used application for you. Now, don't get scared. If you ever run across something that needs the terminal, you can just copy and paste. If it's from a reputable source, there's little harm in it, even if you don't understand what's happening. Now, it's not really a good practice to just blindly copy and paste commands from an untrusted source, because that's just a recipe for disaster. And some Linux users actually prefer to use the terminal for most of their tasks. Me personally, I use the terminal when it makes sense, because I feel that it's a lot faster. Because after all, if you know exactly what you want a computer to do, and you know the command for it, it's actually the fastest and simplest way to go. But don't worry too much about that now, since that's going to be later in your Linux life. When I first got into Linux, I more gravitated to using the GUI whenever possible, and I actually did not think the terminal would actually be a most used application, but here I am today. And to conclude this video, Linux Mint actually ships with the Firefox browser by default, which in my opinion is actually a very good browser. I would actually try this out before installing Google Chrome or whatever browser you use. And here's the start page. You can always change this if you don't like this. But anyway, let's go to my YouTube channel real quick by going to youtube.com/DrewHowdenTech, and then I've got my YouTube channel up here. Now, since this is a virtual machine, playing a video will be garbage here, but if you were to do this on bare metal, it's gonna be much smoother, trust me. But anyway, looks like there's not really much more to go over, and I don't want to drag out this video to be unnecessarily long, so let's call it a day and shut down the system. And that's how to get around the Linux Mint desktop. So thanks for watching. If you liked this video, found it was helpful, hit the like button, share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment.